Hello and welcome to our lecture number 33, Hierarchy of Control, Week 3, Module 3. Myself, Dr. Ajay Kumar Gupta from Sri Rawatpura Sarkar University. Once again, I welcome all of you on SWAM course of Industrial Safety and Fire Safety Management. This lecture will provide you a comprehensive overview of the hierarchy of control and its application in various workplace safety scenarios. It is a critical concept in occupational safety and health. The hierarchy of control is a fundamental framework for managing workplace hazards, and it's crucial for ensuring the safety and well-being of employees in various industries. The hierarchy as outlined in this lecture includes: first, elimination. This is the most effective control measure involving the complete removal of a hazard. For example, using autonomous guidance vehicle to eliminate the need for human operated forklifts. Second is substitution. In substitution means replacing a hazardous material, process or equipment with a less hazardous one. This could involve using non-hazardous chemical and machineries. Third one is engineering control. In this, controls modify the workplace or equipment to reduce exposure to hazards. Example is include machine ventilation system or automating hazard processes. In fourth topic, we will see administrative control. This control focus on change work process and procedure to reduce exposure to hazard. Training, standard operation, procedure, maintenance schedule and signage are examples. Fifth, personal protective equipment. This one is the last one in the hierarchy of control. PPE is, in short form, is the last line of defense and include items like masks, glove and safety gears. It is used when all the control have been exhausted. So, the lecture also highlights the importance of measuring and monitoring control measures effective, as well as considering factors like cost, reliability when selecting controls. Additionally, this lecture discusses how the hierarchy of controls can be applicable to address the COVID-19 pandemics and emphasizing measures such as social distancing, health monitoring, ventilation and remote work. Overall, this lecture provides valuable insights into the principle of workplace safety and the practical application of hierarchy of controls to mitigate risks and protect employees. I would like to go a little deeper in the hierarchy of control and perhaps also to look at it from different perspectives, proactive, reactive, than the sorts of thing. The hierarchy of controls should be introduced really at the beginning of any projects or event. Any sorts of those of any improvement of risks and hazard or any type of project. Not really, and after the or after an event, it should also be part of management or a management of change. For example, the OJS prevention through design. Far too often we see the hierarchy of control are a trending indicator when they should really be a leading indicator. What seems to happen as events or a projects come up or area are relocated. This get lost in the design phase or similarity accidents or injury fixes. Organization of hierarchy of control. The hierarchy of control has existed in the safety world for many and many years, just like situational awareness, human performance and safety culture. The hierarchy of control is absolutely necessary to protect employees of all ages, background and experience level in any safety culture, in any businesses or in any industry. The official introduction of the hierarchy of control took place near 3/4 of a century ago and comprehensively is a process that been around for decades. It has been proven effective through the use of it, and the hierarchy has found its way into various governing bodies and documentation. What I want to emphasize on this slide is that really you cannot manage what you do not measure, and you cannot measure what you do not see. So, it is very difficult to improve something or build on something that is invisible. So, you cannot see anything, you cannot improve it. So, what you measure, you manage. So, principally the control or controls what we are going to speak about in little bit is more around how you can improve something that you have not measured already. So, risk assessment or hazard identification, how do you manage that information that you have identified? It was very long time ago, but there was a famous saying by a person called William Albert Deming, who said, "In God we trust, all other must bring data," and that really refers mainly to the importance of data measurement and analysis. So again, you cannot really improve what you can see, and a very similar aspects to that is the iceberg concept, where some are calling it the safety iceberg, or really it is the culture iceberg. And the idea of the culture iceberg came way back in 1976, and the iceberg concept of safety performance is often measured in a manner similarly to looking at the visual portion of the iceberg, where it is actually belongs the surface where the real learning lies. And just 10% of the workforce of the workplace safety issues are in fact obvious, where the rest of it 90% or so of safety problem lies in wait below the waterline due to a lack of culture awareness. lack of measurement, lack of analysis, or lack of visibility. There is also a similar concept for concept or poor quality. So, we are talking about managing what we measure. So, giving the iceberg concept and basic assessment and things that we can measure and identify, understanding hazard and risks are really the key, and the hierarchical risk control or the hierarchical controls are actually necessary to avoid such risks. So, let us go through the hierarchy controls for most effective down to the least effective. So, eliminate of course is the top one. So, combating the hazards at their source, removing the hazards altogether or removing the hazards from the process is the sort of definition of the eliminating portion of the hierarchy of control. So, an example could be risks such as dusty working environment are controlled by removing the pores of the dust rather than providing ventilation or filters or special protection to actually eliminate the source of the dust. The second one being substitution of course and replacing the dangerous by non-dangerous or a less dangerous hazard. Removing the people from the hazardous situation by changing various things. This involves substituting, for example, equipment or substance which is non-hazardous or less hazardous risks, or substituting a forklift truck to a pallet jack, for example. These are regarded as the sort of hazard control and changing hazardous to the non-hazardous thing or type of control. We then go into more exposure, so that engineering control, and that would be adapting the work to an individual, the design of the workplace, the choice or the type of work equipment, giving collective protective measures. Priority over individual protective measure. So, prioritizing control measure which make the workplace safe for everyone working there. So, giving the great benefit, for example, removing hazardous dust by exhaust ventilation rather than providing PPE. So, we saw, continuing in that example, adapting to a technical process, it is important to take advantages of technology and technical process or progress, which gives both the designers, employers and employees the chance to improve both safety and working method. For example, using light curtain instead of bulky caging and fancy items. When making any changes to the operations, it is crucial to have the management of change in place also. So, there is no impact on quality, productivity and efficiency, and most importantly, we do not have the employees working harder than before. So, that was the engineering and isolation. The next one being administrative, or you can say admin, and that would be around developing a coherent overall prevention policy which cover technology, organization of work, working condition, housekeeping, which is most important, social relationship, and the influence of factors relating to the working environment. Giving appropriate instruction to employees like SOPs or run of the time miles lessons. Making sure employees are trained and are fully aware of the company policy, the safety procedure, the good practices, officials guidance, and any test results and legal requirements that we need to share. And then of course at the end, at the bottom, PPE should always be the last resort if none of the above is possible. These are the sorts of group as the exposure, control, and the hierarchy of control is exactly how this should be approached when avoiding hazards, with the elimination being the most effective all the way through to PPE being the least effective. Obviously, the least cost as well, but that would involve the most employee effort. So, the top tiers of elimination is as simple as it sounds. This is the best and most effectively way to avoiding a severe hazard and its associated risks. The complete removal of a material or process that causes hazards, and while the definition may be simple, the actual achievement of it is pretty much more complex. So, an example for that would be an autonomous guideline vehicle, for example. So, I think some of big warehousing companies have a lot of this. So, you eliminate the risks. There are no fork trucks left in the area. So, therefore, no people, no fork trucks, no risks. So, you eliminate that hazard, and so the eliminating in the measure that must be chosen for something like this. And then you could have things like efficiencies and all that sorts of thing that comes with the various improvement. So, you do see some improvement and efficiencies that are linked together when it comes to making an improvement. Another good example of eliminating hazard control in manufacturing is the spray painting process, and this process possesses both a health and ignition concerns. So, it does improve that for a risk and hazard perspective. in order to isolate the hazards in the process, many manufacturers utilize a spray booth. So, you eliminate the person completely and therefore eliminating them from any risks from dust, explosion, ignition and of course toxic inhalants risks as well. The next one there being substitution, the second most effective hazard control in protecting workers after elimination and hazards substitution can involve not only changing one chemical from another but also using the same chemical in a less, and substitution can also be made to process and equipment. In making a substitution, the hazards of the new material should be considered and monitored so that a new hazard is not introduced causing a poor substitution. So, substitution can also fall or fail as a strategy if the hazardous process or material is reintroduced at the later stage in the design or production phase, or if it costs or quality concerns causes a substitution to not be adopted. So, a little case study here, a facilitating for example was having multiple injuries. It was number one on their injuries list, and on a daily basis it seems to be the workers are opening boxes using traditional sorts of standing knife or utensils knife where the blade is always statically out of the handle. Injury decreased significantly after substituting the traditional knife with a self attracting safety knife. So, there is a couple of example there of the knife risks or hazard. Now, the another example of substitution such as the use of water base rather than the oil based paint, substitution hazardous than the less hazardous chemical, replacing noisy machinery with the tool with quieter machineries and tool of course as well. That would be a good substitution. So, a few example there. The third one down on the list, engineering or isolation control, are really method designed to get as close to eliminate the hazard as possible without actually eliminating them. So, you reduce the risk of frequency by quite some number, and this is achieved by designing something into the facility. So, there could be design phase which you can obviously then copy or paste later or on share a good practices. A piece of equipment or procedure themselves to reduce the hazard or employees exposure to it. So, isolating the equipments by the uses of an enclosure or barrier or even a guard. Isolating an electrical or temperature hazards, you can say thermal hazards. Ventilation is also another one way for any hazards, fuels or gaseous, either naturally or by the use of an extraction fan or a hoop. Process change is also considered an engineering control. So, automating the hazardous work so that no employees has to be exposed is an example of changing of process, and often engineering control does not exist by themselves. They also need to be used in conjunction with other controls such as PPE, or to ensure that they are used and working properly, as you can see in the example there. You have some engineering control, but you also need to have PPE. There is obviously various factors also to consider while selecting engineering controls. So, there is a few example there of machine guarding. Do you cover it all or just have a simple light curtain where operators can still have much more visibility to the machine? So, some factors to consider: how easily it is to be used, because you obviously do not want to impact the employees workload or stress by making an improvement or a change. How much does it cost of courses of eliminating risk version cost is a bit of a on a scale subject that a lot of people consider as well, and of course reliability. It is foolproof or not? Does it need constant engineering or repairing or something like that, or maintenance? So, those are the sorts of factor for that. Also, another example of an engineering control could be mechanical version. This lifting device that lift or tilt, they are used to adjust material for easier material handling. So, it certainly save on the back, and that does prevent muscular injuries and potentially cause more efficiency as well. The fourth tier, the administrative control. The administrative controls are used in the workplace to reduce or limit the exposure to a specific hazard. So, this kind of hazards control works by changing how work is done when elimination, substitution or the use of engineering controls is basically not feasible. So, administrative controls could be training. So, workers should be trained to identify hazards as well as monitoring the hazards, exposures and safe procedures for working around the hazards. Additional employees should know how to protect themselves and their co-worker as well. Procedure and the steps in the job process may need to be rearranged or updated or standardized to keep the worker from encountering the hazards. Developing standardized safe work practices is actually an important step. Once it's standardized, you can then standard the way of managing the risks as well. Maintenance, having a maintenance schedule for machinings known to be hazardous can keep everything running smoothly and safely. Preventive maintenance will address any equipment issue before they become a problem, and of course signage as well. So, here is some example of signage there. Housekeeping. Housekeeping is also a good way of maintaining a good control. So, substituting a clean and cluster free space. So, having an example of what the expectation is will greatly reduce the risk of injury or minimize the severity of an accident. So, you have some example there of poor housekeeping, good housekeeping. So, lots of risks involved on the number of types of injury being slips and trips. Housekeeping is a very low cost and effective means of controlling risks. It involves good behaviors. Obviously, when you have visitors come around, it is good practice as well. It involves keeping the workplace clean, tidy and all times and machining good storage system for hazardous substance and other potential dangerous item. The risks mostly likely to be influenced by good housekeeping is also fire as well as the slips, trips and falls. Signage as mentioned earlier, wall signs and floor signs can be posted, pasted or installed to enforce administrative controls. Visual signs, visual signals can remind workers which area are prohibited from entering, which area are out of boundaries and when breaks need to be taken to the limit. As an example, so lookout, so lockout, tag out, safety sign, basic signage is a good administrative control to have. Sometimes the patterns of work can be changed also so that people can do things in more natural way. So far example, when removing components, packing them and considering whether peoples are left or right handed or encouraging people in office to take breaks from the computer screen by getting up to go visit the photocopiers for example, or to get some files or printed documents or something like that. So it is good to mix it up a little bit to change the work patterns or even rotate people due to the risks of particular activity. Here are some examples listed on the slide. Reduce this exposure involved obviously reducing the time during the workday that employees is exposed to the hazard either by giving the employee other worker to do or rest period. It is only suitable for the control of health hazard really associated with the activities. So for example, noise and vibration, display screen equipment and hazardous substance. However, it is important to note that for many hazards, there are also short-term exposure limits as well as the normal working workplace exposure limits. Safe system at work for admin related hierarchy of controls. If the risks involved are higher or even if they are medium, then the details of the system should be in writing. For example, a safe system at work or a method statement or a standardized operating procedure or SOPs, and these details should be communicated to the employee formally in the training sessions. If the risks are low, then the details of the activity may be conveyed verbally, and also the training has been done and the instruction of safe system at the work have been done. The safe system at the work must really clearly state the tasks that it covers, highlight the major hazards and risks, details the step of safety, complete the tasks, and that includes means of isolation. Who can understand the tasks and how it is supervised? Any emergency controls and of course PPE requirements etc. and be provided to an employers who are to understand the task. So it is a control there. All hazards control measures, whether they really on engineering or human behavior control, must be mentioned of course for their effectiveness and supervised to ensure that they have been applied correctly. So the final slide here is I thought to include it because it is obviously we cannot get away from it. It is being a couple of year now, but the applying the hierarchy of control for COVID-19. So, we little much discuss about the hierarchy of control to COVID-19, PPE being the protective masks or the face shield and the respirators and the gloves and everything like that that people have been using over the last 2 years to limit the spread of it. And then you of course have the vaccines and the boosters to at least limit the transmission or prevention. Thank you for listening and learning.